Evening, everyone. We're going to get started on the fifth commandment of the Ten Commandments. So this is honor your father and mother, and it's not nearly as exciting a conversation as Sunday is going to be. So I'll just preview. Can't wait for Sunday. But let's get through tonight too. Okay, so I'm going to call that halfway. I don't know if that's halfway or not, but we're about to be halfway through this. So honor your father and mother. You've got me tonight. You've got me on Sunday, and then Wednesday, and then I'm out of town. So you got David. So thank you, David, for being flexible. So brief review. I really like the slides that David had, so I'm going to incorporate them, but I'm going to have less words on them than David had, because we already covered it on Sunday, right? So the first four commandments: no other gods before me, no graven images, do not take the Lord's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath. What does that actually mean? Okay, now I can see. Know the gods before me, the first foundational commandment. The Creator, Liberator, reorient to Eden, Christ, heaven. Remember, they're at Mount Sinai. They're coming out of 300 years of captivity in Egypt. They were, I'm going to use the word brainwashed, but that's what they knew. They didn't have anything else other than they knew that there was God, and they were praying to him. And he said, I'm going to give you a Savior, Moses, but that's all they knew. Everything else they knew was everything they saw around them. So his message to them, I think, was, I am the one. None of these others that you've seen are anything. I'm your God. I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt. No graven images continues in that same vein. God is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. He is revealed through his word. He is spirit. He cannot be represented in this world. Nothing in heaven above, nothing on earth, or nothing in the seas. Don't even think about making a graven image. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. Don't make any false oath. Don't make any human sacrifices that profane his name or any other holy items. Don't blaspheme God's name. Don't prophesy in his name falsely. God is holy. Treat him and his name as such. He's the only one. You can't represent him. Even his name is holy because it's representing him. And then finally, we talked about remember the Sabbath. God created the world. God foresaw what life would become and human nature. And the key point there, I think, is take time to focus and remember God. And he put it on a weekly cadence because we forget. I forget sometimes what I had for lunch. But we're very short-sighted. And we need that minimum weekly reminder. But it also says in the New Testament, pray without ceasing. So that's a all the time perspective. So those are the first four. I'm going to claim, I thought I had this pop up, but it doesn't. I'm going to claim that this is the pivotal commandment, that we're going to shift from a God-centric, this is the first four are all about God. We're going to shift from God-centric and that individual relationship, that spiritual relationship between me and God, each of the Israelites at Mount Sinai and God, Moses and God, very God-centric individual, to expand the circle. Now we're going to expand it out to the first unit that comes to mind, or that exists, which is the family. And there's a special bond with the family, and I think we'll get into a little bit of that tonight. And then the remaining five take it out one more circle. It applies to the family as well, but it really applies to the rules of society and how we're expected to interact with each other outside of our physical family, outside of our church family, and really outside in the world. So that's my perspective. David may change it up. It's okay. This isn't in the Bible. This is what I'm looking at. How do I think about these commandments, and how do I group them? So that's what I think we're going to see. So you'll see it again on Sunday. But we're going to start with Exodus 20 and verse 12. And I put it up here for us. Honor your father and your mother, so that your life will be long on the fertile land that the Lord your God is giving you. So you can look at this commandment, and there are really kind of three parts. One is the commandment, honor your father and your mother, right? Part two And we actually read this in the New Testament with a promise. What's the promise? That your life will be long, that it's not going to be terminated early. And we'll talk about why. We'll see that in a minute. And then what's the third part of this? The rest, right? Where are you going to live long? You're going to live long in not just the land, but it's the land that God gave you. So it's really reminding them of that promise to Abraham again. So 3 parts to this commandment, and we're going to be looking at the following topics. So, like I usually do, what does it mean to honor somebody? What does honor mean? And it's actually interesting because it's not what I thought it was going to be. So we'll look at the actual definition and get into that. What was God's purpose regarding this commandment for his people at Mount Sinai? Why did he tell them this here at this time? And, one of the answers that we didn't offer up was, well, he told them here at this time for this one because he told them all the rest of the commandments at this time, right? So it's part of a package. And they really needed the first 4, but the others came along for the ride. No, there's probably more to it than that, but that could be a potential answer. And then the third area, how do we apply it to ourselves today? So I'm assuming that we're going to cover 3 and 1 and 2 when we start talking about it, but that's what we normally do. So what does it mean to honor your father and mother? Hey, yes, high esteem. This is coming up in a different order. That's okay. Hopefully I sent you did it say final PowerPoint? Okay. I sent 2 or 3. I don't know what I was thinking. That's okay. I'll let you look. If there's a more recent one, I'll let you get that. But honor your father and your mother so that, it's totally the wrong order, so that your life will be long. So Deuteronomy 5:16 is the parallel passage to it, right? It's a repeat of the 10 Commandments. And this one is, honor your father and your mother exactly as the Lord your God requires, so that your life will be long and so that things will go well for you on the fertile land that the Lord your God is giving you. So those are basically the same. Are there any items that really stand out there, the difference between them? Or are they close enough that we just look at it and say it's about the same? Yeah, the difference between 2012 and 5:16, exactly as the Lord your God requires, is the only thing that really stands out to me is the difference between the two. Are we to take a lot of meaning into that, or is that simply just another way of saying that, this is a commandment coming from God? Okay, thank you. It'll be about the same. I just made a couple of tweaks. So I think they're about the same. I didn't really see a huge, they're different words or additional words, but I think it's the same concept, same meaning, same everything. So, thank you. You won't be surprised at anything you're going to see here. Still the wrong order. Great. There were 3, right? You got the latest? The one that said final? Okay, thank you. And that's on me. Okay, so I don't think anything. So the third parallel passage is found in Ephesians 6, verse 1. As for children, obey your parents in the Lord because it is right. As for children, obey your parents in the Lord because it's right. The commandment, and this is where the Ephesian writer harkens back to the 10 Commandments. The commandment, honor your father and your mother, is the first one with a promise attached, so that things will go well for you and you will live for a long time in the land. So it's stated it exactly, right? It's the same words as you see in Exodus 20:12. So 3 different times we have the same commandment given to us. Don't know if we make anything of that or not, but there it is. Any thoughts on this, just these 3 before we go on? We're about to get into the what. Okay, what does honor mean? So Strong's Concordance, the original word is kabed. And this is the part that I found really interesting. To be heavy, weighty, or burdensome. And you're like, but that's not honor. And, well, maybe it's the time of us. So we're a burden to our children is what I just heard. But yeah, so maybe time of life, right? When we turn the tables and the children take care of the parents. But we'll get more here. So there are other additional examples of how that's used. To get glory for oneself or to honor oneself, right? So it's how is the honor established, or how does it come about? I can get it for myself. I can make something honored, or I can cause someone to be honored, right? You can put someone up for a honor. To be made honorable. And this is one I would reserve for God, right? He has made things honorable because he has declared them holy. And so that's one use of that. And those were actually broken into 6 different definitions, but I consolidated. So interesting, I call it interesting use. These are all going to be the word honor, that's translated honor in honor your father and your mother. But there's some that are used in a negative context, which harkens back to the original definition that you see above. So Exodus 8:15, 32, 9:34, 10, and 1, these are all referring back to the Pharaoh. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite from the plagues, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said he would. The word hardened, according to Strong's, is the same word as honored. But obviously it doesn't mean honored the way that we interpret honor. It means heavy or weighty or burdensome. Another one, Nehemiah 5:18, because the bondage was heavy upon this people, right? When they were in captivity, and then they were coming out of captivity, and all the suffering that it was a weighty suffering, right? This bondage was heavy. How is that honoring them? So this is one of those words that we have a completely different interpretation of in today's English language than was understood or used back then. So those were both negative examples. The positive context would be Exodus 14:4, 17, and 18 as well, that I am the Lord when I am honored through Pharaoh. So we're still dealing with Pharaoh, and it's the same word, but he is weighty through Pharaoh, right? So God comes to life through the plagues that were placed upon the Egyptians because they weren't doing what God wanted them to. That's how I interpret that. 2 more examples, then we can have some discussion here on this one. Isaiah 24:15, therefore glorify the Lord. So I guess I asked the question, does the word honor, does that mean that we're supposed to give extra weight to what our mother and father say? You know, the kind of that heavy, that I'm going to defer to you. Those are your words. I don't know about the burdensome part, but I like the first part around the heavy or weighty, right? It just, you impart extra importance or meaning to them. That's how I'm interpreting it, but I don't know if we have any mics to run around, but we have a question here, and then, yeah. Thank you, Nathan.
Jesus said to the Pharisees, you hypocrites, you tithe the mint and dill and cumin, but you neglect the weightier matters.
I didn't look that far ahead. I wonder if it's the same word.
I think it's the same idea. When
Yep.
you're making decisions in life, you should give weight to what your parents are advising you.
Good. Thank you. That's good. Rick.
A couple of commentaries had some interesting observations about this. So one of them was the word meaning take care of in old age as being a primary thought. And I think that's the one that we might think of a lot as caring for parents. But the other one was the reciprocal of the parents' obligation to teach their kids at all times. And so when you honored your parents, you continued to give weight to their words, to their thoughts about how to serve God and carry that forward into your life. And so it was the reciprocal thought of the parents teaching the children as they grow up, and then the child giving weight to those words as they continue their life. And both of those would result in promise from God.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly along that train of thought, in that God's prescription for man at this time, when he's giving them this recipe for success and how to be his children, his prescription is for the perfect form of that which he created. And that's why when he goes on to talk about the marriage, when you hear about women being submissive to their husbands or men glorifying their wives, that only works, that relationship that he describes, if it's godly and everything's in balance the way God intended. And the same thing with child and parents. This honor you're giving your parents, the idea is that when you go into the land, your parents are going to be godly people, and that they've been instructed to raise you up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Therefore, honor them, listen to them, take heed to the things that they're saying. And I find it very interesting that this commandment, along with the Sabbath, is not prohibitive. It's because if it was in the same language as the rest of the commandments, it would say, do not dishonor your parents. Instead, it says, honor your parents, bring honor to them, and honor them through the things that you do.
Albert?
Something that's striking me when we went back to the text where it talks about dwell in the fertile land. In context, God is about to establish rules and tribes and families and inheritance. And I just wonder, I don't know if we have an answer, if it's not, God already knows what he's going to do and what is needed, but I wonder if a slight possibility is this is in preparation for what will be happening years down the road.
Yeah, so let me build on that for a second, because as we were talking through this, when the children of Israel are at Mount Sinai, who are they listening to? Moses or God or someone else? The word was spoken through Moses, and I think that he was the primary mouthpiece. The very initial commandments that were offered at the end of chapter 20 in verse 19, then they said to Moses, you speak with us and we will hear, but let not God speak with us lest we die because of the thunder and the lightning. And they just said, you're too much, we can't do it. So I interpret that as verse 18 saying God was speaking to them, and then they pleaded with Moses to let Moses speak to them directly. What about generation 2, generation 3, generation 4, generation 5, generation 6, generation 7? They had the stories from their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-grandparents that were handed down generation to generation. They didn't witness God's presence on the mountain. So I wonder if this is one of those where because it was the pattern to be able to give the parents the authority to speak as with weighty words, to speak as if they were God, not in God's place, but to children, they are the ones in charge. If I can, bear with me a little bit, if I can use it that way. And then they've got a commandment from God that says you have to listen to us children because we're God's servants, mouthpieces here for the family. I don't know. But I think that kind of fits with a little bit about what Albert was saying too. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Okay. Oh, good. Question over here, Nathan. What comment?
17, Kabed is used by Moses. Amalek lifts his hands up. And the symbol of that in my mind is
Weighty.
he's old, he's getting weary and tired, and then Aaron and Hur help him. Maybe you can honor your father and mother by lifting them up when they get weary.
Yes. Thank you. I just think there are a lot of interesting perspectives here that show up in this one, especially in that definition. Okay. And apparently I got ahead of myself, but so these are my thoughts, and I really want to get your feedback because I can edit the deck before it goes on the website. So God is our spiritual father. back to David's point, God created us. Think back to creation and Eden. He goes on, he gets to tell us what is good for us. He's our Father. He's our Creator. He is everything to us. We wouldn't be here without him. The parents are our physical mother and father. It's actually a rhetorical question. How mature are children? Depends on the age. And some children never grow up. So sorry, Mom. So not very. In general, not very, right? They need guidance. They need direction. They need caring for. They need wisdom, which parents should be able to give them. So I still think this is the same concept from God. The parents, he's given us parents to provide that direction and wisdom. And he's emphasizing that through this commandment. Are all parents perfect? No. Are some parents abusive? Yes. Is that what God would intend? No. So if they do it right, and this is the promise part, if they do it right, if the children obey their parents in the way that God intended, children stay out of trouble and live longer. And that's kind of twofold. One is it's the I don't go to places where I shouldn't and get in trouble and potentially killed. The other one is I don't commit things that are so heinous in God's eyes that God commanded, we're going to look at that here in a minute, that those children be killed because he can't suffer that behavior. So I think it all comes back to authority. God makes the rules for his family in heaven and on earth. You saw that in Eden. You're seeing it at Mount Sinai. And then, of course, you see it in the New Testament Christians. Parents make the rules for the family on earth. And then the question would be, what are the consequences, at least then, of not obeying? So let me see if anybody completely agrees, completely disagrees. Any thoughts on this? Jordan has one.
Sorry. I do think it's interesting, and you alluded to this, what you're just saying, that, with this one, it's the cause and effect, honor your father and mother so that, or as a result, that your days may, prolong the land God gives you. Maybe I'm reading too much into it or thinking too much outside the box, but it does seem like, later on, right, when they're about to go into the promised land, the blessing, the mountain of blessings, the mountain of curses, and the rationale behind that. One of Moses' final farewell speeches in Deuteronomy 30, where he says, I've set before you life and prosperity or death and adversity, but choose life in order that you might live. And he gives reasons for that. So I don't know, it does seem like there's, I don't want to say an extra emphasis, but there is another dynamic to this one that we don't necessarily see on some of the other ones as well, which is what you were, I think, alluding to as well. So,
David?
I'm not sure if I just said this, but I feel like whenever he gives this commandment, the assumption here is that, this isn't written like legalistically with 800 pages and subclauses. We're summarizing the image of a God in a few sentences. And so the assumption is that your parents here, this is the shape of a righteous family, this is the shape of a righteous marriage, this is the shape of a righteous man, and I'm describing to you, God saying, who you should be to be my children. So the assumption is the first 4 commandments are being done already. And therefore, since that is an assumption, moving into these, you should honor your father and mother because they're teaching you to be a Christian, and that's what's going to, if you honor your father and mother who already have no other gods before God, no graven images, their life has a purpose, they know God is holy, and they rise with God on their lips and go to bed with him on their lips, then those are parents that you want to honor, and that will actually prolong your life. That will.
Good, thank you. As Jordan was talking, I came back to Joshua 24:15. Tell me how this verse, if at all, I'll tell you if it does. If you don't, sorry, applies to this commandment. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So we were talking about gods and serving them, and that was commandment 1 and potentially commandment 2 and 3. Where does commandment 5 come in there? That's right. What was the assumption? So Shannon got it. First out. Thank you. Me and my house, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The assumption is that his household will follow him because he's worthy of honor, because he is, I think Joshua is probably a pretty safe example to say he probably got a lot of it right. Okay, moving on. Any other comments? Okay, Old Testament examples. So I'm going to go through a few verses, and we're going to look at, again, that kind of positive spin and the negative spin, and then we're going to move into the New Testament. So all of my concepts are out. So if I didn't get any concepts that you thought I should have covered, raise your hand, and we'll get you a mic. Deuteronomy 5:16. I think we've already read that one. Sorry, that is the one. So from an encouragement or a positive perspective, Proverbs 1:8. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. Both father and mother, honor them by listening, heed, hear. Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Kind of combining that concept of supporting them when they're older. Proverbs 29:17. Discipline your son, and he will give you rest. He will give delight to your heart. So again, positive results from the son's behavior for the parents. Proverbs 17:6. I should have put them in order, I guess. But grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and the glory of children is their fathers. Not the children are the glory of the father. The glory of the children is their fathers. Do you see how that's turned around? And their grandchildren are the glory or the crown of the aged. That's the one that we expect to see. It's the other way around for the children. The children should be able to look up to their father and adore and honor. Proverbs 15:20, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish man despises his mother. Okay, so those were actually all positive, even though that last one kind of had a little bit of both. Here's some warnings. And they're small because there are a lot of them. And I want you to think about that, right? The number of positive in the Old Testament, the number of warnings, because we're going to see something slightly different when we get to New Testament verses. Deuteronomy 27:16. My glasses. Cursed be anyone who dishonors his father or his mother, and all the people shall say, Amen. Exodus 21:15. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Well, what if they deserved it? There are no exceptions there. You can't strike a mother or father. Exodus 21:17. Whoever curses his mother or father shall be put to death. Proverbs 17:25. A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. 30, verse 17. The eye that mocks a father and scorns to obey a mother will be picked out by the ravens of the valley and be eaten by the vultures. Proverbs 20:20. If one curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out into utter darkness. Proverbs 19:26. He who does violence to his father and chases away his mother is a son who brings shame and reproach. Proverbs 19, verse 13. A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is a continued dripping of rain. Proverbs 28:24. Whoever robs his father or his mother and says, there is no transgression, is a companion to a man who destroys. And finally, Proverbs 30, verse 11, there are those who curse their fathers and do not bless their mothers. And that's, again, very similar concept here of blessing or not blessing, foolishness, striking, violence, in item 8 up there. So, all right, so let me stop there for a minute. Where did most of those verses come from? Oh. Nathan's on his way.
Demonstrates the wrong sorts of things, and we don't follow him. How does that coincide with what the scriptures teach?
So that's the ultimate question, which I never want to be put in a position to have to answer, because I don't know how to answer that. So Harrison's question was, what if your parents are truly evil and sinful and are abusive and fill in the blank abusive, right? It could be anything. These scriptures are referring to the old law. We're going to look at what the new law says too, but no matter what it is, it's sin. Okay. My only hope would be that in a church family, if something like that were happening, that we would have enough ability to help influence for the better. But I don't know, how do you protect a child? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I think another one too is example of Job, even though, well, not per se his parents, but to God, you know, how what evil and what torment has been done to him, and he still did not, turn against God and do that to him.
Yeah, so that's the first answer, is pray and look to God for guidance, but I'm thinking the spiritual family is probably a close second. Brian. Comes Nathan.
The only way I can respond to Harrison's question is that I do not see any conditions upon which God commands you to honor your parents. You know, honor the honorable, but hate and dishonor the dishonorable. He didn't say that. And so you got to look to, in what role did your parents, why does God want you to honor them? At a minimum, they brought you life, just the same way that God gives us life. And hopefully, to some extent, they provided for you and nurtured you in some particular aspect.
David. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because that's why the Bible is so powerful and able to permeate every sort of life circumstance, no matter what century you lived in and no matter what socioeconomic level you were brought up in, whether king or pauper or slave. The Bible even addresses how a slave should respond to their master, not as an endorsement of slavery, but because, guess what? In thousands of years of history, there are slaves. How do you be a Christian as a slave? How do you be a Christian with a bad boss? How do you be a Christian in a family where your parents are abusive? And all of those things. And the first thing that came to mind when Harrison asked that question was that we could go down the rabbit hole to discuss how a Christian should respond in that. But the true answer is sin corrupts and breaks and things get messy. It's like the ripple effect. Same thing with the husband who's abusive to his wife. There is a prescription for that sort of thing. There's all sorts of rabbit holes you can go down to. But nonetheless, it breaks everything up. It's no longer Eden. It's no longer heaven. It's no longer the joy and the gem of life that God intended for us. When the father begins to lose that sort of respect because he's acting in a non-like godly manner, you lose the first 4 commandments, and the entire foundation crumbles. Yep. So it doesn't work. But there is a way to respond, because we live in a broken world.
So there's a passage in Mark where Jesus talks about there's no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or farms for my sake and for the gospel's sake, except one who will receive 100 times as much now in the present age, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and farms, along with persecutions and so forth. So I think there's a sense where I don't know what it means to leave mother and father for my sake or for the gospel's sake, but maybe it's your mother and father are actually antagonistic to your faith, and so you leave them, and he promises that if you have to do that, you will receive more. And I think that's where we're talking about the brotherhood of Christians, that you'll have hundreds of mothers now.
Yeah.
The one more than the one you left.
And it's a very weak comparison, thank you. And it's a very weak comparison, but even so with our son going through Scouts, as an adult leader, you are required to look for signs of child abuse. And if you see them, you're required to report. And that's a heavy burden too. What if you get that wrong? Doesn't matter. Get the right people in there, especially if you think there's something wrong. I think it's that times 1,000 in the church family, because we are all brothers and sisters in here. So I can't tell you how many aunts and uncles I had growing up in the church, because everybody was the aunt and uncle. Even Denise's dad, Uncle Henry. So yes, I think that was the very intent. And so let's segue into the New Testament, because I think that this family, we call it a family for a reason. So I think that's why. So let's take a look at this. So New Testament examples. So I chose to break it into two categories. Jesus' teachings, right? So this is, again, directly from God, and then warnings, and then positive. So just let's look at the count here. Matthew 15:14, for God commanded, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. Luke 18:20, you know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, honor your father and mother. Oh, spoiler alert. That's coming up in the next 4 lessons. There it is, one verse. Luke 14:26, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, right, we just heard that verse, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. We put away the earthly things and we look to God and his teaching. Matthew 19:19, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 19:29, and everyone who has left houses, it's the same as 14:26. I thought I combined all those. Although it's slightly different. Will receive 100-fold. That was the verse you were quoting. Will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. And again, this is interesting because it's very similar to the idea. It doesn't say honor father and mother here. This is actually leave father and mother. The Old Testament verse said, honor father and mother, you'll have a long life, and you'll live long in the land. This one says, follow me, God, and you'll inherit eternal life. John 3:16, again, this is back to that concept of God, our Father. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. So that's one version of the New Testament. Here are some positive perspectives on how we should honor parents. And these are examples. These aren't commands. That's why I broke them out to look at them. So Luke 2:51, and he, Jesus, went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. So is honoring include being submissive? I think so. That's an element. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. John 19:25, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own house. And again, it doesn't say honor your father and your mother, but Jesus applied that to now John. Well, I'm assuming it's John, my fault. The disciple whom he loved. And there were expectations, right, from the mother about what that meant. Colossians 3:20, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. So that's one of those that has both a positive and a negative in it. So the one that I want to point out here is that second half. We can do things to push behaviors and push little personalities too far and can make them discouraged and can make them lash out and can ingrain the wrong behaviors. So there's a warning to fathers to not do that. Don't provoke your children. And then 1 Timothy 5:4, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make them return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. Again, that concept of a lifelong honor of your mother and your father, and then the expectations that come along with it. So this is the question, and we have 5 minutes, so we're good here. So discussion again, get your thinking cap on. How might children, I said less than 18 years old, because I put that on the slide, disrespect and not show honor to their parents? Name some examples, shout them out. No, it's not part of the job description on how they disrespect. They can disobey. Oh, look, the very first one. Anyone else? Lie. Okay, it's coming. Throw a tantrum. Show contempt. Eye rolls, anybody? I actually did an eye roll at work today. Not today, yesterday. I didn't get in trouble. I don't think I did. And this is is it the prodigal son, or is it it's a different parable? Sorry. Say, yes, I'm going to do it, and then don't do it. As opposed to the one that said no and then did it. Sorry, I got that. I'll have to fix that before I put it up on the website. Curse their parents, right? We got that straight out of the Old Testament. Thou shalt not curse your parents, or other hateful words. Strike, hit, abuse. We hear that happens today, believe it or not, elderly abuse. And then treat them as insignificant or stupid. Okay, and then what else? So there's one more slide after this. So any other obvious ways that we disrespect our parents? Brian?
He submitted to our Father, yet not my will but thine be done. The reverse would be, yet my will be done and not thine.
Okay. So listen to them and do what they say. Your parents, listen to your parents. Okay. Positive. How might adult children, because it matters, right? You expect certain things out of a 4-year-old and certain other things out of a 40-year-old. I'm not 40, by the way. Show positive regard, love for your parents through words and behaviors. Hugged your mom recently? Hugged your dad, if they're still here? Give them a hug. Seek out, listen to, consider a parent's biblically informed and wise counsel. Provide care, time, financial support. We saw those examples in some of the positive examples that we just read in the scriptures, right, about the widows. Let their children take care of them. What else? Yeah, okay, that was the last slide. So what else? We have 2 minutes. I'm just going to sit here and stare at you. Because there's probably a ton of different ways to show respect and honor weighty words as an adult to your parents. Oh, who? David, then Brian.
Similar ways to how we obey God, just in a different way, but we submit. And what I tell Abe whenever he's being ornery is the lesson of you're commissioned to obey God, but how is it that you, as you grow up, are going to follow in Christ's footsteps if you will not listen and obey your earthly father? And so I try to train him with respect for me and how he responds, and I find myself saying things I never thought I'd say. Like, hey, will you please say yes, sir, or don't be disrespectful. He needs to respect me so that he can learn to respect his God in heaven.
Okay, thank you. Brian.
I think you probably have it up there, but I would say patience, tenderness, kindness, and consideration as your parents spiral from virility to feebleness and a second childhood.
And there are many different ways, and you can have sickness that takes a parent from you, that then causes you to serve a whole lot more than you ever would have before, and that applies to a spouse as well. You can have the terrible disease of dementia that takes the body is physically healthy, but you can't have the conversation that you'd had all the growing up years with him anymore. That's terrible. So now you, again, have to serve in a different way. And then you've got the whole just mental decline where you're not making decisions, not because I think they're right, but because it's obviously wrong. And yes, it's back to your own judgment, but it's like, but something has changed, and then having those conversations. So those are, and everyone unfortunately has different situations that they have to deal with. So really, then it comes right back to us as children of God to say, how are we listening to God's word, listening to his directions and his commandments, and are we actually doing what our person, parents, mother, father, serving them as we need to? So anyway, slightly different class today than we've come up to this time. Sunday is going to be completely different. So the question on Sunday, we're going to be talking about do not murder. And what I want you to think about is, if God is not in the picture, okay, right? If God were not in the picture, why is murder wrong? And I hope HE can give me some pointers before we get there. Okay, thank you. Well, he has to deal with that all the time, that's all.